It is disgusting what's going on. And I feel a deep sadness and pain for what's happening to billions, not just millions, but billions of people around the world that have no hope for the future. They don't know when this is going to end. They don't know what they're going to do when it ends. They have no work, no job, nothing. They've lost everything. This is a huge cleansing process. So I don't know what's going to happen when we come out of this, but we better find something good for people to come back to. And I think more and more people are discovering that the system that we have just doesn't work for us. It doesn't serve us, it doesn't work for us. When things go wrong, people get stranded, they lose everything. Surely this can't be what life is all about, right? And so in many ways, as terrible and as painful as this is for many, many people, and I feel really blessed that I'm not one of those people that's suffering because we have enough funds in the bank for us to survive this period. Although my business is gone, I've lost my business, but I'm not on the street hungry, right? So I believe that this is really paving a way for people to find the Ubuntu movement, find the message of one small town can change the world.
Right.
And when they've discovered and embraced it and realize what it is about, how simple it is, and how we can turn our towns into unimaginable places of prosperity and abundance for everyone, very, very simply and very, very quickly. I think this is the opportunity for people to find us and find the message and go, this is what we need for the future. And that's why I'm so passionate about this. I've been doing this for what, 1.5 decades now, spreading this message. And I think the time has come for this message to finally take root. The seeds have been planted over a long period. It's now to take root and start to sprout. So what I realized is that the entire political system was completely and utterly rigged globally. It's rigged for an outcome that is controlled by those people that run the world through the financial and banking systems, as many of your viewers or listeners may know. And if they don't, you will get all this information on the Ubuntu Planet website, ubuntuplanet.org, right? Or onesmalltown.org, and take you to the same website. And once you realize what money is, how it was introduced to humanity some 6,000 years ago, how it was then perfected into the money system, the financial system we have today, some 270 years ago by the Rothschild Empire, and you start seeing this is an entirely, utterly synthetically created control tool to control and enslave humanity. And then you realize, okay, well, how do we get out of it? And that's when the horror of horrors hits home, when you realize that there is no way out of it. They have closed every door. They control the legal systems, they control the governments, they control the judges, they control the armies, the police. Everything is stacked against humanity. It looks like we've been given liberties and freedom and choices. It seems like it and appears like that, but those are just small little liberties and choices and a selection of choices that we're presented with under the guise of freedom and liberty.
Right.
And millions of people have obviously figured this out. And there has never really been a way to get out of it, because you can't do it with politics. You can't do it with resistance. If you rise up, they'll crush you because they got the army and the military might. So how the hell do you get out of it? And that's when that moment of enlightenment and emancipation happened in 2016, when suddenly I realized, hold on. Buckminster Fuller actually said this already earlier in the 20th century, when Buckminster Fuller said, you don't change a system by fighting it. You change a system by creating something new that makes the existing system obsolete. And that's when it hit me. We can't get involved in politics. Let's do something that's never been done. Let us use the tools of enslavement as tools of liberation. And that has now literally become our slogan for the One Small Town Can Change the World strategy. It is so simple that when people first come into contact with us or start to embrace this, they start to question, oh, well, how is this going to work? How is it possible? It's too simple. It looks too simple. It sounds too simple. Yes, because it is. And simple is good. So we have a very simple solution to get out of this mess called One Small Town Can Change the World. And it starts in small towns. And it literally starts with the mayor and the people of a town taking control of their own town. We bring in our own source of electricity. This is really important. I'm not going to go into the detail about it now because we don't have enough time. But we bring in our own source of electricity, so the town has its own source of electricity. that becomes the foundation for all the businesses, the projects, the community projects, and the businesses that we launch in that town. Everything in the town is co-owned by the people and the investors that come in to fund whatever businesses we start. Everybody is required to contribute just 3 hours a week, to the community projects or the businesses that we set up. And everybody that contributes 3 hours a week automatically becomes a 1/3 shareholder in all the collective of all the businesses that we set up. So by literally contributing a fraction of your time out of 168 hours a week, you contribute 3 hours towards the community projects that, there'll be a whole system that will be allocated or set up for the allocation of where you are required and where your skills are needed and so forth. That's all simple. These are all computer systems that exist. We have this technology. We're not stupid. We know how to do this and how to set this up. And literally within a small town of, say, 5,000 or 10,000 people, overnight, through our collaborative, cooperative labor force, our town becomes not only the co-owner of all the businesses that we start with the various investors that come in, but we suddenly become an immediate and a direct competition to all the large corporations of the world. And we can literally compete with anyone we choose, whether it's manufacturing cars or building supercomputers or new technology, whatever it is we choose, we can do because we have this insane amount of free labor that is available for all our projects. This is such a spectacular example how when we start competing against each other, the way that we've grown up with capitalism, everything in our world and our life is based on making money and capitalism and competing and being the best to get to the top of the pile. And then, you're king of the castle. And then somebody wants to push you off so that they become the king of the castle. That's obviously not a solution. This has slowly but surely evolved into what I call a fully evolved and mature strategy to create a new world without fighting the existing system, by using money, using the tools of enslavement as tools of liberation, using money, capitalism, corporate structure, the greed of capitalism through investors, using everything that the capitalist system has thrown at us. We take it and we use it so that it works for us and supports us and benefits us. The only thing we change is we change competition into cooperation and collaboration. And it's incredible. That one little thing, how everything changes. Every single problem we face as the human race, no matter whether it's healthcare, poverty, homelessness, technology, you think of a problem, you throw it into that one small town pot as a problem to solve, and it will solve itself. Because the solutions come not from me or from individuals, that come from within the community. So if you imagine yourself in that community and you imagine what the world would be like in that community, the answers and the solutions come naturally, because it will always be for the greatest benefit of everyone in the community, not the greatest benefit for him or her or the mayor or the council. It's got to benefit the whole community, and you'll see how simple the solutions are once we start adopting that kind of approach. It is unbelievable. The spectacular thing is that once the small town, under the leadership of a mayor, it obviously has to be a conscious mayor that drives this thing. Once we have our own electricity supply and our electricity generator that provides us our own electricity, that means that all the money that we normally pay towards electricity bills that leave our town, that money stays in our community. So now we have $1 million or more every month to use for upgrading our town and setting up projects and businesses for our community that belong to all those in the community that participate in the projects. It is such a simple model. No one is forced to do this. It's not compulsory. So the beautiful thing about this is that if we find a mayor that actually sees the wisdom and the benefits to his or her town, the mayor doesn't even need to get consensus from any of the people, because the people might not understand it. They might think it's some sort of a communist plot or to entrap them to work for free, or people have weird ideas. So the mayor might just say, well, that's okay. Nobody has to participate. Right. By simply inserting or implementing the electricity supply, the generator, the mayor has already brought independence to his or her community. Right. And retains all the money for that community, and that mayor can then start doing incredible and unimaginable things every month for that community. And very quickly the people will see, oh my goodness, I see what you mean. I didn't understand it when you were explaining it to us. I see what you mean now. Okay, well, I want to participate. Yes, thank you. I will go and, do whatever needs to be done for 3 hours a week. And what do I get in return? I get some electricity, free electricity, and I get milk and bread and clothes and computers and whatever we make in our town. What needs to happen is right up front, whatever system, the financial system is set up in that town, that communal structure must ensure that nobody can run off with that money or transfer it into a private offshore bank account somewhere and just vanishes, this has been happening in governments at the highest level in the USA, in South Africa, and it happens in all the countries. So it's the number one thing that we need to guard against as that community. So a very strong influence and control mechanism needs to be in place by a community council or a council of representatives of the people, and not just the mayor and the council that is appointed by the mayor or the government or whoever is responsible for that council. And the other important thing is that the moment you start doing this, we don't live in an isolated town or an isolated country. We live in a global village. Facebook and YouTube and the internet connects us within seconds. Right. So I have no doubt, there's no doubt in my mind that the moment this happens in a small town and we start doing this, we implement that new electricity technology generator. First of all, everybody is going to want to know what the generator and what the technology is all about, because that's what I get all the time. And I said, that is only going to be released to the mayor that wants to implement this. This is not to be released to individuals for their homes. And this is why it's called one small town and not one small house or one small home. Because what we're doing, once again, we're using the tools of enslavement as tools of liberation. Even the electricity is used. We're using the electricity platform so that everybody benefits equally, not some benefit more than others. Everybody has access to the same electricity, and if you contribute your 3 hours a week, then you get free electricity. It's simple. So what's going to happen in this one small town is that we're going to use less and less money, because everything we create for ourselves is free, while we keep making more and more money with our very successful business, because we're exporting everything we make. But we're not using the money, and suddenly people start to realize, oh wow, I have all this money, but unless I go somewhere else, I don't need to spend it on anything. And suddenly people realize, oh wow, we don't really need money. Look how much we've got, and we're not using the money. And it's at that moment that we have a real shift in consciousness. That is the ultimate and final shift in consciousness, when people realize that money does nothing. People do everything. And literally, it'll slow very steadily. I think we'll see a slow but steady eradication of money. And one day we wake up and actually look back and go, we haven't used money in 2 or 3 years. Events like this have been very interesting to me, especially musical events, because I know how powerful musicians and the message are and can be. But what I do find, that as conscious as many of the musicians are, and as beautiful as their lyrics are, and as beautiful as their messages are, outside of that message of hope and unity and so forth, it's not followed by a plan of action. Or, okay, well, we live in a terrible world. You lift people up. They come to the concert and you lift them up. You give them a sense of euphoria for 2 or 3 hours, or a whole day at a festival, or 2 days or a weekend at a festival. That people come back all charged up and euphoric from these music festivals, and they come back to their miserable lives, and they hit a low and a depression, because they back in the prison, back in the slave camp, and they wonder what the hell happened. I had such an incredible time connecting with all these amazing, conscious, spiritually gifted people, and then I come back to this.
Right.
There must be something better than this. How do we get out of this? So my very urgent and clear message to all the musicians, all the conscious musicians of the world is, go carry on doing what you're doing. Inspire the people, lift their hopes, lift their spirits, but then give them a solution.
Right.
And if you don't have a solution, then study the one small town strategy. And if that resonates with you, then tell people about it. I can't force you to tell them, because it might not resonate with you. But if it does resonate with you, then leave your people at your concerts and on your videos. Tell them about one small town, because you as a musician will benefit from it. You will have unlimited access to performing and playing the best gigs you can ever imagine without ever worrying about making money and paying your expenses as a musician. So it benefits everybody. So that's really my message to the conscious and aware and enlightened musicians out there. Find out about the One Small Town and become part of the solution, and not just raising people's hopes and then dropping them back into their world of misery. Can you imagine if everybody that sees this video goes out there and tells 10 people, and they tell 10 people, how quickly we can spread this message? Within 1 year, we'll have 300 million people around the world spreading this message. That's how quickly this can spread.
So the cyclical time paradigm was universal. You found it in China, you found it in India, of course, but it was there in Greece and Rome, and it was there with the Danu, and it was there with many other peoples. I think all, in fact. So the time cycle is a part of the heritage of humanity that only was jettisoned by the Roman Empire and the Catholic, let's say, bastardization of Christianity, the changing of the real teachings of Rav Yeshua, that took time as being linear. There was still an end time, so it was a limited time. And in the same way in the Jewish tradition, a linear time, but a time which was known as a Heilsgeschichte in the German version of that understanding, as expressed by Martin Buber and other Hasidim, that although time entropically leads to a decline, not a progress, but at the end there is the time of the Messiah, and there will be a world to come. So implicitly, the linearity is still cyclical. And you find that in the mystical Christian mystics as well, the more esoteric teachers who are teaching theosis, the divinization of man, is the return to that. And you find it in the Quran as well, because of Adam being considered the first and highest prophet who had all the names, as we heard recently. So that knowledge returns, and therefore the paradise, which is the environment of the Adamic being, becomes remanifest. And they did have the understanding that the first yuga, which is called variously the Golden Age or Sat Yuga, Krita Yuga, Satya Yuga, various different names, but it is also referred to as the solar dynasty, as the second age is the lunar dynasty. But it wasn't that these people worshipped the sun. No, that was a much later fallen state of the remembrance of that. It meant that they were in a state of total consciousness, that the consciousness of every inhabitant of the golden age was literally the light of the Son of Suns, the source of the light that creates the universe, and that manifests as the sun and the stars and all of the heavenly bodies and the celestial light that is a reflection of the supreme supernal light. So the understanding of the solar dynasty is the complete consciousness that is independent. It does not require a reflection from another, as the moon requires the light of the sun. So once you get into the lunar dynasty, you already have a shift from non-duality to duality. The duality is still a high one because the moon is full or mostly full, but it is still a fallen state. It is a state where now, rather than being in Atman consciousness, they are in soul consciousness. And then in the Copper Age, the soul and the ego are together. That's one reason why it's called Dwapar Yuga. The two towers, the two powers of soul and ego are in relationship, that the ego eventually becomes dominant and represses the soul, and that begins Kali Yuga. So we have a cycle of time, but it is clear that in the Sat Yuga, time stops. There is no sense of time because every being lives in the present and lives egolessly. And lives in a state in which the world and the self are not different, and the world is perceived directly as light, as the emanation of consciousness, and not different from consciousness. So there is a non-duality and a sense that all that is not even a dream, but a perfect reflection in space of the information, the beauty, the power of the self, and that it is the self, that the world is internal to the self, not other than the self. So the consciousness then gradually shifts, and by the time we get to Kali Yuga, of course, the ego is embedded in duality. It has a split mind. It considers the world to be separate and objective and different from consciousness and outside of consciousness, even though it's very clear that nothing is outside consciousness. You couldn't know anything that was outside your consciousness. But there's a belief, and it's a religious belief that's called science, but it's a religion, that we are actually in a world that exists independently of us. Because consciousness is identified with bodies, and bodies are temporary phenomena that come and go in the world. They are part of the impermanence of the flux of time. But the consciousness remains present, even though it becomes unaware of its presence because it becomes lost in thought. And as soon as your consciousness becomes lost in thought, and you believe that that thought is what you are, I think, therefore I am, as soon as you become lost in that, you live in the past and the present, because thought is all about that. Wishing that the past was still here, or that it didn't happen, but having some relationship, nostalgic or horrified by the past, and some fantasy about the future that is either positive, hopeful, or negative and fearful. But the ego is always ping-ponging between these and is never present. And so it feels a lack of being, because being, the real, is only presence. And the ego never knows presence, because in the present it dissolves, it dissipates. And so the mind continually chatters because it is terrified of its own dissolution, its disappearance into a presence that is so awesome and so full of energies that the ego cannot tolerate it. It cannot tolerate the bliss that would show up if you remained present for an extended period. The ego would begin to dissolve, and all that would remain is presence. This is the whole point of meditation, but very few people meditate in such a way that the presence remains consistent and unbroken long enough to dissolve the sanskaras, the latent tendencies of the ego mind, so that the ego pops back after the meditative formality and is never dislodged from its fictional condition as a character. But the presence that is beyond the fictional entity that one comes to believe one is, because the belief that the mind has reality and represents one takes over as the implicit religion of the ego itself, that cannot be undone or seen through by the ego, because it is based upon that, and it dreads its knowing its own lack of reality, of essence. So it is only in moments of trauma, when one becomes speechless, that one knows presence, or moments of divine love, or being hit by a lightning bolt of Shakti, or one is filled with that supreme presence to the point where the ego dissolves completely, that one has the sense of what the real truly is. So time itself changes its qualities as it goes on, and consciousness becomes more dense, and the world, rather than being a dream, becomes something that is all too solid and all too resistant and all too filled with danger, so that it has to be experienced by beings who remain vigilant and on guard and using their minds to calculate their way of dealing with reality and trying to get whatever benefits can be extracted from the flow of temporal change. And the consciousness does not have the luxury of abiding in presence because of its paranoid tendency to need to compare the current situation with the past and try to create an optimal future. So time, from the perspective of the classical period, is seen as a circle that is entirely present all at once. There is a recognition that when you enter a state of total presence, you enter a higher dimension in which the apparent flow of time is entirely here. There is no past and no future, even though there is history and there is the apparent shift. But actually it's an illusion, because consciousness is present throughout it all, and that presence is always here and now. And so all of time is present in every moment, in the same way that the entire ocean is contained in every drop. You are a microcosm of the macrocosm, but all of your past and future lives and all of your experiences are present in every moment if you are silent and still enough to perceive all of that information. It's there, but it's too subtle for the ego mind, which is chattering, to pay attention to. And this is why information can be drawn from the so-called Akashic records. It's simply the information of the entire kalpa that is entirely present in every moment if you pay attention. And you know how to decode that vibrational frequency in which it is contained. So presence is the key to liberation, because presence is non-duality. And so this is why meditation is the path, the key to attaining the liberation that is always here, because in fact there is no one needing to be liberated, since the ego is a fictional entity. And so, because you are not the ego, you only believe you are actually that total presence. As soon as that belief is dropped, the goal of liberation is recognized as being your natural state. And it could not be anything else. So this is the understanding that we must be able to fully grok in order to be liberated from not simply the illusion of impermanence, but the fear and desire that the ego is based on as its effort to overcome its lack of being, and which it can never do. So presence is the only medicine to overcome that endless journey through the illusion of time that can never reach fulfillment until time itself comes to an end.